Hey y'all, I'm Kim, host of Book Marketing Mania, and I'm so thrilled you're tuning in to learn how to build your audience and reach new readers as a podcast host and guest. If you're struggling with serving your target readers and showing up as your authentic self online, you will love this conversation today with my new friend, Kelly Thompson. Kelly and I met in a Christian podcasting group, and she hosts the awesome podcast, The Genius in You. She's also a coach for moms who want to learn how to market their coaching businesses without posting content 24/7. Ooh, I'm here for that, y'all. I was so thrilled when Kelly pitched me to swap as guest on each other's shows and couldn't wait for her to share her podcasting journey, how she shows up as the expert her listeners trust, even while interviewing guests, and how she makes time to podcast as a busy homeschooling mom of 4. You're in for a treat today with Kelly, so let's get to it. Hey, Kelly, welcome to Book Marketing Mania. I'm so thrilled you're here to serve my listeners today.
Hey, Kim, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, this is so fun. And y'all heard me gush about Kelly in the introduction and her amazing podcast. And so I wanted to ask you, Kelly, because I know you coach your listeners and your own clients on this, is, for our audience that are authors and some of them are also coaches, how would you recommend they go about growing their audience? Because that's such a huge thing for authors is to grow their platform, their online audience. But how can they do that and market it in a way that they don't have to be online 24/7? Because of course that takes away from writing their books.
Absolutely. I can so relate to this question because when I first started, I actually did write a book myself. And when I first started, I was kind of looking for ways to get visible. And I think I was doing everything that you shouldn't do, right? Like when you first start, I think the number one thing we should all do is really tap into who you are and how you want to show up and get more visible, right? So I think we see the social media gurus and we're like, oh, well, we're supposed to post content 24/7 and that's how you're supposed to show up. And that's what you do. And that's the key. And it really isn't. If that's how you are and you enjoy that, then by all means, go for it. But for me, I'm more of an introverted soul, and I really did not enjoy showing up on social media 24/7. And so I would say probably the best thing for you to do before you even consider where you're going to show up and all of that is how you want to show up. Are you more comfortable on video? Are you more comfortable on audio? Whatever that is, that thing that you feel comfortable with is the thing that you're going to be able to be consistent with. And that's the most important thing. Now, that being said, obviously, social media is the one that's in your face and it's, the front and center. You see that all the time. But that is by no means the only way for you to be marketing your book, your business, whatever it may be. I started out doing that. And what I slowly came to realize is that I didn't enjoy it. Right. And sometimes you have to go through those experiences to really understand more about yourself and to also give you the courage to kind of go against the grain because you see what everyone else is doing and you're like, okay, well, I guess I got to do that. Right. But once you do, for me, my story, I'll just say my story. When I started, that's all I did 24/7. I was recording reels, kicking my kids out of the office, get out, I got to record and all of the things. And I was not happy doing it. And I burnt myself out. And then over the course of time, I realized that what I did love is talking to people without having to show up and think about looking good or whatever. And now for those of you who are like, I just record video and it doesn't matter to me what I look like, power to you. I am not built that way. So I at least want to do my hair or something, put on something halfway decent so I don't look like a hot wreck. But for me, it was really more audio. I enjoyed the audio. For me, it was a way for me to connect with people by talking. And, I function better in small groups, one-on-one. So that was a great way for me to be able to kind of share my voice, use my message to talk about my business and for people to connect with me. So I would say, like I said, really discover who you are and how you want to show up.
Yeah, that's such great advice. And I think a lot of our writers and authors can really relate to that because, they're writers, and I think that it just seems like podcasting is a natural curve to that. Even if you're not a speaker, you're just putting the audio to your words that you've written. But I know, just the social media thing. I mean, and we hear so many people debunking it and I think if it's like an addiction and that's where you spend all your time when you should be spending your time elsewhere, that is definitely an issue.
Right.
But what I found is like, even just like having a presence there, especially for an author, and you can go engage with people, just like you say, you love talking to people. You can go talk to your people without having to create the videos and stuff. Because I'm the same way. It's like if I've just come home from a workout, the last thing I'm going to do is hop on video.
Put a camera in front of my face.
But if that's your thing, go for it.
Right.
Like do
Absolutely.
you. So I love that.
Yeah.
And that just leads right into me asking about your own podcast, Kelly, because it's so amazing, called The Genius in You. And I think so much about that too with authors and writers that are wanting to write a book is kind of having to identify what is that thing that makes you kind of a little bit different? What is your genius, right? So tell us a little bit about, your podcast and getting started and who your target listeners are.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, that Genius in You podcast really came as a result of my own journey, trying to discover what my own personal genius was, right? Mm-hmm. Like you said, not bashing social media, because 100% you need to have a presence, because anyone that's going to, get your book or look to hire you, they're looking to see what your presence is. Like, are you on social media? What are you saying? Do you have a podcast? What are you saying? Do you have a book? What are you saying? Right. So they can get to know you a little bit better. And so for me, that Genius in You podcast really kind of stemmed from my own journey, trying to discover who I was and what I really wanted to do. Like I'm a mom of 4, and I was basically at home with my kids. I retired from the workforce for a while, and I was kind of trying to discover what it was that I felt that God was calling me to do. And that's not to say that if you're a mom, you need to be doing more, because you don't have to. But for me, I just felt like there was some more out there for me, and I wasn't sure what exactly that was. And so the podcast is kind of one of those things that has grown with me. When I first started, I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
So I'm all about telling my clients, like, imperfect action for the win. You don't have to have it all figured out. Just go out there and start doing something. So I started recording these episodes, and it was really just chronicling my journey. Like, what am I doing? What am I learning? And sharing those kinds of things. Because I'm big on, if you do have a podcast or if you're posting on social media, whatever it may be, use what you're currently doing already. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. What are you learning? What are you experiencing? And sharing that with people, because we always think that what we know isn't that big a deal. But really, there are people that are dying to know exactly what you already know, the experiences that you've been through, the knowledge that you have. And so just sharing that. And so that's what I do on the podcast. It really is designed to help women discover their genius and use it to make an impact and an income. So I've had the pleasure of being able to interview, I don't even know how many, countless numbers of female entrepreneurs. And it really has been a way for me to be able to share those messages with women who are just getting started, or maybe they're in the middle of it and they're not sure what they're doing and they're thinking about giving up because they feel like maybe this isn't what God called me to. And really just kind of sharing those messages, because a lot of times we don't have a lot of people in our corner that we know in real life that are going to be sharing with us like, oh my gosh, you're doing amazing. Good job, Kim. You're killing it, or whatever, because they don't really understand what it is that you're doing when you're holed up in your office with your headphones on and a microphone in front of your face, right?
Yeah.
So being able to share, these messages from these other powerhouse women that I've been fortunate to be able to interview and really learn in the process myself has really been like amazing for me.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Well, I want to ask you more about your podcasting, your interviews, because as you were talking through that, I was thinking, with authors, a lot of times that have started podcasts, they often see other authors that have podcasts. They have these huge, platforms because they've been doing it for years and years and years. Right. And they interview other authors. And it's typically kind of in the same arena of publishers and things. And they're kind of, I scratch your back, you scratch mine, interviewing each other. And I often see like new authors that want to start a podcast and they think that, okay, if I get big guests on my show, it's going to grow my show. So I want to ask you about that, because I'm really curious as to what you say.
Right.
Because it's what I was hearing from you. It's more like you are the expert, you're a coach of coaches and you have this Genius in You podcast, but then there's all these other people that have these stories to share. But it's like, I know just from listening that you do such a great job of that, Kelly. But you're like bringing them into your show. This is your show and you're talking about what you're talking about and you're kind of bringing their story in to feed people. So I'd love just to kind of talk through that, like your thought process on that. Again, for the authors that might be thinking, oh, if I just have big guests on my show, my podcast is going to blow up. I guess is really what I'm thinking about. I'd love for you just to kind of elaborate on that some.
100%. Yeah, definitely. I think that we are naturally wired kind of to look at what someone else is doing and think it's like somehow better than what we're doing, And really that's not the case. If someone is more quote unquote successful than you, whatever that means, they're either doing something different, they believe something different, or for whatever reason, they're in a specific position in their life where they've been working this hard and they now are reaping the fruits of their labor, right? So, having a big guest on your show is not necessarily the best way for you to get more visibility. And for a couple of reasons, and I've had some really big names on my show. But the problem with that, and I don't want to phrase it as a problem, but for lack of a better word, let's just say the problem with that is these people have already built their audience. So they are not necessarily going to be as diligent about promoting you as you would be about promoting someone else who's maybe a little smaller scale. If you look for people that are kind of in the same ballpark as you are in terms of success, right? Those people are going to be more, one, inspired by you because they're also having an opportunity to learn from you. But then additionally, they will be inclined to help promote you because you're both kind of in the same boat, as opposed to someone who's like a millionaire. They're not going to be promoting you necessarily.
Right,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because that thing that you said, Kim, about, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. It really is this collaborative effort when it comes to podcasting that really is such a beautiful thing. When you are able to connect with other people that are in kind of complementary industries, you're able to get in front of an audience that you maybe wouldn't otherwise have reached. And that person on the other side is able to get in front of your audience. So it is this wonderful opportunity to share. I love doing podcast swaps. It's a great way to get in front of other people. So as an author, when you're trying to promote your book, your goal shouldn't be to try and get just in front of the person who has the biggest audience, because the person who has the biggest audience may not have the audience that would be interested in your thing. Right. So it really is all about connecting with people that are maybe in a similar situation, in a similar industry, not necessarily the same industry, but a similar and complementary industry. And if you get your thing in front of those people, they're more inclined to want to know more about you and then eventually buy your book, hire you to work with them, join your program, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, that's such great advice. And I think, with a lot of the author podcast, it's just if they interview author after author after author. And it's just, we were like, oh, I want to be on that show because that's what they think is that it's going to grow their own show if they have that author back on their show, or it's going to sell a lot of books. And it just doesn't always happen, unfortunately. Because I think it's really about they're coming for the host, just like your listeners come to you, I'm coming to me. And I think that, unless you're in the podcasting world, you don't always get that. So I think that's really important. So also the other thing too, Kelly, is on that same kind of thread is, thinking, okay, if I'm going to start a podcast like for authors, then they want to interview other people because that's so much more fun, like we're doing, right? To sit and talk to each other.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to build your own platform, I'm always an advocate for, you have to have some solo episodes, right? Because we're all trying to get to know you, and you do a beautiful job of that. So will you talk a little bit about how you kind of mix and match solos and interviews?
Absolutely. So when I first started, the first couple were solo episodes. And to be quite frank with you, I didn't enjoy them. I didn't like doing it. So then I had shifted to really trying to just get guests because that's easier. It's easier to have conversations with people than it is for you to kind of dump out your thoughts, whatever those may be, for you to be able to have an episode. However, the problem with constantly just having guests is that people are not getting to know you. And that's ultimately the goal, or at least it should be if you have something that you're trying to market, right? The goal is really for you to be able to demonstrate your expertise, your knowledge, your personalities, for people to be able to listen to you and connect with you. So like you said, Kim, with the people that are listening to all these other author after author after author shows, ultimately the people that are listening are there because they want to hear the host, right? They're not following around all these different authors. They're really there to hear the host. And just like for you, when you start a podcast, if you're listening, when you start the podcast, the goal is for people to want to connect with you. So you have to share your personality, your thoughts, your dreams, your goals, what you think, your perspective. And that's the thing that's going to cause people to go, wow, Kim has this amazing book. I'm really interested in what she's got to say. I love her podcast. I wonder what her book's like, or I wonder what her program's like, or I wonder what her whatever, for them to be able to get to know you. So you have to have a mix. For me, you don't, let me qualify that. You don't have to have a mix. You could really do all solo episodes, or you can do a mix of solo and interview. But what I don't recommend is you just doing all interviews.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. And thinking about that, like you said, you can do solo, you can do a mix, but yeah, we don't recommend doing all interviews. Definitely. And I think about like if you just back up on this interview and listen to what Kelly shared in the beginning, and we were talking about social, but it's kind of the same thing, like really just sharing your story and sharing what you believe in and your values and just how can you communicate that with your target readers. And I love that so much because that's perfect for your episodes if you're starting out a podcast. So I know a lot of authors too and writers. Kelly will tell me, I don't have time to start a podcast. I don't have time to put one more thing on my plate and it'll take away from got to get my book written or get the edits done and start marketing it. And they just think this podcast is just one more thing on the list. So what tips would you share with somebody to maybe kind of change their mindset on that?
Yeah, I get it. As a busy mom to four running a business and I homeschool as well. So my kids are constantly needing me. So I get it. It can be definitely a challenge to quote unquote put one more thing on your plate. But what's the point of writing a book or having a program if no one is ever going to read those amazing words that you written down, right? So they kind of have to go hand in hand. Your goal should be to try and get that book into as many hands as possible, in front of as many eyeballs as possible, so they can hear your perspective and they can hear what's uniquely and amazing about you and the genius that you have that you shared in paper format, right? So they really have to go hand in hand. So one, I would say shift your mindset. It is not just another thing. It is the thing that's going to help you grow your audience. And that's important if you want to continue writing. So as far as tips go, I would say one is mindset. Two is you have time right now to start a podcast. I know you do. You may not think you do, but if you really sat down and thought about the pockets of time where you're just kind of vegging out, or maybe you're, in between things that you're doing, you have time to start a podcast. So I would say, one, take a real assessment of how much time you have in your day. We're all busy. That's just the nature of the beast. But I promise you, if you can carve out a couple hours a week to do a podcast, you will be thanking yourself months from now. So I'm officially at 100 episodes, super excited about that. Because when I started, I didn't think I had time. I didn't think I was going to be able to continue doing this, but it was just something fun for me. It was kind of an outlet for me to kind of get my message and my voice out there. And now here I am 100 episodes later. So I promise you, you have time. And if you can carve out a couple hours a week to do that, you're going to thank yourself. Additionally, I would say, and I just started doing this so don't listen to me in terms of being organized. Kim is much better at that than I am. But I just started coming up with a plan for my podcasting episodes going forward. And I think that's super, super important, because what I would find myself doing is a few days before going, okay, what am I going to talk about now? Which episode am I going to air that maybe I've done an interview with someone? And it was kind of loosey-goosey in terms of how I was doing it. And really being organized is key, because if you can be organized about your podcast episodes, it just flows much smoother. And even if you decided to do, okay, I'm only going to do 15 minutes. I know someone who has literally a 7-minute podcast. She's like, I got 7 minutes. This is what I'm going to say. And then I'm done. 7 minutes is amazing. Then you're not editing anything. There's no mess ups. It's 7 minutes of content of you sharing your thoughts, your expertise, or whatever. And that's it. You're done. Can you imagine just 7 minutes? If you can carve out 7 minutes plus the time it takes you to do some show notes and, write a catchy title, you're done. And your future self will thank you, because the best time to start is right now if you haven't done it already.
Yeah, that's so true. And just listening to you talk about 4 kids, homeschooling, you run your own business, you have time to do it. And I'm so glad you said, just put your mind on a couple hours a week, because it does, it needs to fit into your schedule. And I know, we hear all kinds of horror stories out there of, it just takes hours and hours and hours and hours. And it's like, no, it does not have to by any means. So let me ask you real quick, what's working well for you to market your podcast? Because I do think that's a big piece of it, right? I think starting is just the easiest thing, right? Just get started, get going, see if you like it. But then when it comes to, getting out there and sharing it with new listeners, what's working well for you to do that with Genius and You?
Yeah, I think the most important thing you have to do is anything that you are putting out in front of your audience, you have to make sure they actually see it. That's just the reality, whether it's a podcast episode or a social media post. It's like less than 1% of people actually see your content. And again, we are all super, super busy. And so even if they see that little alert that comes on and says, hey, a new episode of The Genius in You, they're in the middle of something that you're like, oh, cool, I want to listen to that, but then they just don't, right? So I always talk about the importance of creating an email list. It is so super, super critical. So any kind of freebie giveaway you can do to get people excited and interested about your podcast is gold. I mean, that is amazing. And then if you can get them on your email list, so they say you create a giveaway. I've done this before. You have a giveaway of some kind and you get people on this list to sign up for this giveaway. Now you have them on the list. And so now when an episode comes out, you can let them know, hey, just dropped a new episode with Kim Stewart. She's an amazing podcast coach. You have to listen to it. It's episode number, whatever. So right now for me, I'm getting more intentional about sending out emails to let people know about the episodes, because I really hadn't been doing that before. Because like I said, when I first started out, I wasn't even thinking how long I was going to be doing this. So there really wasn't a strategy. So listen to Kim. She has the strategy. Make sure you start with someone who knows what they're talking about and how to do it, and then just go from there.
Yeah. That's such a great advice. And I know I did emails too. I don't know if I did them right away when I started either, but I've just noticed, like, for me, receiving them is like, I know I have kind of my routine. I go into my podcast player and save episodes I want to listen to, but then I might forget, whenever I get busy doing something else. So it's nice to have that email reminder, because you might say something too that kind of prompts me like, oh, this is an episode I need to listen to today. So,
and actually, you know what else is really cool about the email list? I've had people respond to the emails and say, oh yeah, I love this episode. Thanks for sharing.
Oh yeah.
Like, it's just another touch point, another way for you to connect with people, especially now, if you're talking about your book and then you say, hey, on this episode, I'm talking about chapter 12 where I'm doing da-da-da-da. And now someone's going to be like, oh my gosh, that was an amazing chapter. I really love that. And just to hear from people, so you're not kind of shouting into the void. It's a great experience when people connect back with you.
Yeah, that's so true. Oh, goodness. Oh, gosh. This has been so full of incredible truth bombs and all kinds of wisdom that I knew it would be, Kelly. So I'm so appreciative of you coming on today. And is there anything you want to share with our listeners at the last minute? Or I'm going to be sure and put all the links to your podcast and your website, of course, in the show notes.
Yeah, depending on when this episode is coming out, I have a free training every month. You can find that on my webpage, thewaymakernation.com, or you can go to my social media account. I'm Kelly Thompson and Co. And I'm a reluctant social media poster, but I'm always talking about something on there about a free training that I'm doing. So for sure, you can grab that.
Yeah, I'll definitely put all those in the show notes. Well, thank you so much, Kelly. It was so awesome to talk to you today.
Thank you so much, Kim. I appreciate you.
Oh, goodness. I love what Kelly shared about taking imperfect action, saying you don't have to have it all figured out. Just go out there and start doing something. Oh, goodness, y'all. Maybe you need to hear that as a potential podcaster or an author considering other ways to build your audience. And if you want to hear more from us, Kelly invited me to guest on her Genius in You podcast, and I'll be sure to put a link in the show notes when it airs. We pray these conversations are a blessing to you. Thanks for tuning in today. And as always, I'll be there for you to help you build your audience and reach new readers one podcast at a time. See you then.